Good evening, everyone. We are so excited to have you back. Welcome to the One Nation Live Tour with Jade Simmons, independent presidential candidate for this 2020 presidential race. We are thrilled to have you joining us. We want to welcome you for all over America. Tonight's topic is a new era of education. Let's talk about what would it look like to have an educational system that works for all Americans. Young and old, education is something that should last forever. Education should be ongoing. What would that look like to have an educational system work for you and me and those that we love? That is what tonight's discussion is about. It's about having educational systems that work for all people, all abilities, and all types. We have an educational system that propels the American people forward. And so tonight is about casting that vision. As you come on in, I want you to know that we want to hear from you. This is indeed a listening tour. This is a listening tour. So we want to make sure that we hear from you, and not just from our panelists and our guests that are coming on. They're going to be awesome, but we want to make sure that we hear from you as well. So please make sure that you're coming in, that you're sharing your comments, that you are giving us your feedback. What does your ideal educational system for America look like? What would you like for your students, your kids, to have an experience when they are in school? That is what tonight is about. It's about casting that vision. So I invite you to engage with us. Bring us your comments, bring us your questions and concerns. And as always, not only will you be able to hear from Jade, but we have three very special guests, three very experienced guests from all sectors of education who are going to be helping to inform this conversation tonight. So we welcome you in all over America. I want to see your comments. When you pop in, let us know where you're from. I see Diana Brown, Antoinette Gray. I see Tara Lee. I see Tony. Wow, we're excited to have you all. I know that's at least Kentucky and Houston and maybe even Atlanta in the house tonight. So we're excited to have you in. I want to go ahead and welcome our main guest for tonight. That is independent presidential candidate Jade Simmons. Please welcome to the stage.
Hello. I'm so happy to be back tonight. So thank you so much. I'm getting excited. Every night I've been saying, I can't wait to talk about this topic. But I'm really sincere because each topic is tied to purpose and it's tied to people. And those are my favorite subjects. So I'm excited to dive in to talk about what a new era in education should and can look like for us all.
Yay, it's awesome. So why don't we start out with this first question? Why are you so passionate about education?
Okay, so I always say it's important to keep it real. I am a proud nerd. I'm a recovering teacher's pet. I'm a lifelong learner. I excelled in school at an early age, and my parents, our parents, for those of us who don't know that we're related, ISIS, our parents, really valued education. My mother, who until recently has spent most of her years employed as an assistant to deans and presidents in higher education at the college level. She used to research scholarships for me when I was in high school. And as a result, I ended up graduating with the largest amount of scholarships in the history of my high school. My father, a civil rights activist, a lay historian on African and African-American history, he used to literally grill me over dinner every night about what was going on in the news, especially what was happening in the Middle East. He thought that was important for Americans to know and understand. It was literally a sin to be uninformed in our household. I also will tell you that two of my aunts are both award-winning educators, and I've grown up learning and knowing instinctively to value education. But tonight even, I come to you really as a parent of two brilliant kids. I'm a little bit biased, of course. One of who has a diagnosis of high-functioning Asperger's. So today, as a parent, I'm understanding more and more that education and being aware of what's going on in education is not just a luxury; it's an absolute necessity.
That is so true. And I think it's important for us to take that heart in it, because sometimes, legislators can get so caught up in the day-to-day duties of creating policies and platforms that they forget about the children behind those platforms. Yeah. I can tell you that as a teacher, so that's great to hear how you've brought your heart and your personal experience into that. So what about this? What surprised you the most about education and how it was affected during COVID-19?
Well, A lot of things surprised me, but I'll stick to two things in particular. I think we all thought it was pretty hilarious. We saw all the memes of all the parents who were suddenly made homeschool teachers. We kind of saw a collective universal freak out, right? The rollover. And it was really comical at first. But then when you sat back, you realized what was really going on is that humor was a symptom of the fact that we as parents were largely disconnected from our kids and who they are as students. I couldn't believe it when I saw it, when I really sat back and thought about it. I really felt like I got to rediscover who my kids were during this period. The second thing I will say that surprised me, I should say really slapped me in the face, was how it hit me hard that myself and so many others hadn't even thought about the issue of food insecurity at the beginning of COVID. We were, joking about having to learn Common Core, right? To learn how to do math in a new way. And there were kids who suddenly didn't have meals because their food came from the schools that were now closed. So it's one of those moments that for those of us who don't ordinarily think of ourselves as privileged, we realized how privileged we are. And those were two things that shocked me pretty hard.
That's so good. So I have to ask a question as a former teacher myself. Now that you've experienced homeschooling or a version of that, I would say I give all the props to the parents, but a lightweight version, of schooling. Yeah. What newfound appreciation might you have for teachers?
I think it was Shonda Rhimes who came out like on day 2 and said, okay, forget the debate. Teachers deserve $1 million, like a day. Once she had to homeschool. And, I lived with you in your early experiences as teaching. And I remember as a teacher, and I remember the workload that you brought home. And so I think it's always a humbling thing to suddenly be thrust into someone else's shoes. So one of the silver linings coming out of COVID is that we should really be coming out of this with deeper respect if we didn't already have it for our teachers.
That's so good. That's so good. So tonight's conversation is entitled A New Era of Education. So when we think about a new era, what does that vision look like for you?
Well, I've been intentional in titling each of these sessions because you've heard me say almost every time on the daily debrief that we have to now get excited about elevating into a new normal. We cannot dare go back to where we were before. Even if we felt decently comfortable, we have to really look at the areas that COVID shone a light on. I believe that learning for all, as lofty as it sounds, I think that's exactly what we should be aiming for. I believe that we as a nation, we have to begin to dream bigger. And when I say that, I'm not talking solely about the dreams that we have for ourselves. I mean that when we dream bigger, our dreams must now encompass more people other than ourselves, children other than our own. So human nature, we know, won't allow us to think in that way usually until our own needs are met. So as president, I want to use government to serve as a bridge now, a stronger bridge for opportunity, as a gateway to knowledge, to partnership, to access that's going to support more people than we've supported before in a way that over time, they'll be able to begin to have more breathing room and more brain space to even be able to start thinking about how they as individuals, as educated human beings now can serve as solutions in their own communities. And we have to broaden the definition of what education even means. So in our new era, which I believe we're destined to go into up ahead, if we really take a serious survey of where we are right now, I believe that's truly an era where you can have learning for all. So that to me means access to great learning and a solid education must not be hampered or hindered by the neighborhoods we live in or any other marker of socioeconomic status. It cannot be delayed or thwarted by outdated methods. You'll hear some of our guests talk about those methods tonight. It can't be delayed by a lack of fresh ideas. And we must make sure that we are not limited by a limited way of assessing achievement and assessing success. Here's why I call it learning for all, though. Isis mentioned that I wanted this to be about more than just learning for kids. We always think of education as associated with kids, public school, private school, charter. We get bogged down in that debate, or we think in terms of college students. But I believe now we're supposed to be paving a path of opportunity and possibility for not just our school-aged kids and our college students, but that we should be extending powerful opportunities, powerful access for self-improvement and ongoing education for adults, for small business owners, for our workers in struggling industries, so that they can begin to reinvent in challenging times and expand their knowledge, upgrade their processes and systems, and increase their opportunity for growth. So at the end of the day, education is also an economic discussion. We said that a few nights ago when we were talking about economics, that we were really having also a discussion about education. And I always say that if we can't find it in our hearts to think of these things as humanitarian issues, then let's look in our wallets and look at it as an economic issue from the economic standpoint. Lack of education, lack of information, it costs us now, and it costs us into the future. I'm going to give you an example of learning for all and how that expands outside of the traditional way when we think of educating our students and our kids. You look at farmers, for instance, they are struggling right now. And we're seeing, for instance, dairy farmers struggle because every year we always have less people buying cow milk, for instance. We've seen this decline happening since the end of 2014. Dairy farmers in particular have struggled with low prices that result from large supply. So that's a supply and demand issue. But they also result because we're a trendy people. And right now we have traded cow's milk for soy milk, for almond milk, for oat milk. And because of that, we're seeing now a decrease in demand. Imagine if with all this forecasting, since literally from 1975, every year, the amount of cow milk being bought has gone down, being consumed has gone down. What if we took that economic forecasting and instead empowered our farmers to get in on the action? What if we were giving them tools to reinvent powerfully, to be able to create new income streams from alternative milk production? Right now, the debate is whether or not you call it milk. So there's a debate over language, but instead we could be educating our farmers, giving them the tools to reinvent, to be a part of this boom we're now seeing for alternative milk. Now you think, what does that have to do with education? We're talking about education in its broadest form, meaning that we're looking to always make sure that every demographic, every industry has access to the most powerful information possible. Another angle, when I talk about learning for all, I want to see powerful reform to our welfare to work programs. Yes, they've existed for a while. They've been hit or miss. And I feel one of the reasons is because we've always attached work as a punitive form of action. We need to be attaching work now to purpose, to intention. And the people who are engaging in that work must see that work not as dead-end jobs, but they must see it as a path to something greater than what they already have. Work has to be positioned as purposeful and powerful. And I believe that we should be including in these programs greater access to paid for education in the form of trade schools or even college degrees, as well as apprentice programs. You heard me say on the economic session that we should be holding our great American companies accountable, that we should be looking to the ones who are wanting to serve as solutions where jobs are concerned. Childcare would be covered in these instances. And I think that we have to become so much better at finishing what we start overall. I always say that we can't just tell kids to go to college and then not take care enough to find out why they're dropping out of college. We must raise the status and communicate the power of trade schools, of community colleges that are offering a powerful way now to help get students out of debt because they're not accumulating the same amount of debt as when they're going to four-year institutions. Speaking of debt, I'll end on this point because this is a conversation that must be carried into our era outside of COVID. We're focused elsewhere right now. But I believe we need to have a serious conversation. And my first proposals don't include blanket forgiveness of student loan debt, but it does include prioritized forgiveness. What I mean by that is we should be incentivizing our young people to go into industries that they care about, yes, but that also include industries and professions that our nation sorely needs to be bolstered and professionals that we sorely need. For instance, I would love to look first at loan forgiveness for nurses and doctors to incentivize more students to go into healthcare, but also help them be able to stay in healthcare so that when they get out of school, they don't have so much debt that they can't afford to work in the very communities that need them most. We need to be incentivizing, because I truly believe that to whom much is given, much is required. So I would love to see doctors and nurses being able to come out of school and work in the communities that need them most and know that they can afford to care. I also want to prioritize loan forgiveness for teachers. That leads us into our conversation tonight. They are lifting too many loads as it is, and the least we can do is lighten the cost that comes with getting them prepared to hold one of the most important jobs in any society. I could go on and on, because education is of the utmost importance, and we need to respect it as the vital thing that it is. But let me just say, instead of talking at you, I really want to hear from educators, parents, and students everywhere about what you'd like to see in our future. I'm excited now for you to hear from our experts whose passion, whose background and experience is the world of education. I promise you're going to see some powerful passion on display tonight.
That is absolutely correct. And without further ado, I want to make sure that we invite our guests to the stage. They're incredible experts. We have not only Janice Malone, Sue Baylor, and Matt Barnes. These are incredible, incredible educators coming from all different sides of sectors of education, and they together have over 60 years of experience. We have experts in the house, y'all, and we want to hear from you. So don't forget, throughout this conversation, we want you to be engaged. We want to have you tell us about your questions and your vision for education. But without further ado, let me make sure that I invite my guests to the stage. First, let me go ahead and start with Sue Baylor. These, and let me just preface all this by saying these are three very humble people. They have killer bios, but I'm going to just share with you a little bit about them. Sue is the Chief of Operations at Baylor School of Awesome. She's a former school teacher, a current home educator, and for the last 13 years, she has been homeschooling her 3 children, as well as conducting various classes within the homeschool community. Her goal is to help both students and parents step into ownership of their education. Her days are spent coaching students, tending chickens, and playing roller derby. That's what she says. But let me tell you what it really is. Translation, her days are spent changing lives, making world changers, and influencing and empowering the next leaders of our nation. So without further ado, please welcome Sue. Sue, welcome to the stage.
Thanks.
And we also have tonight Matt Barnes. Matt has extensive involvement in the sectors of health, education, and faith-based initiatives. He has over 20 years of experience. He has led $20 million department in healthcare, given away $5 million in philanthropy, and even runs his own educational reform nonprofit. He serves on countless boards and also has experience in both the public and the private charter school systems. Private college systems. During his time, he has also homeschooled 3 children. Matt and Sue, I don't know how you do it. You homeschool 3 children with all of this. He not only is a speaker and a workshop leader, but he has his own blog, and he's a radio personality on topics for parent engagement. So without further ado, please welcome Matt Barnes.
Thank you very much.
And last but not least, I may be a little bit biased, but my aunt, Janice Malone, she has 25 years of education. Man, she has a bachelor's of science in elementary education, a master's of education in elementary administration and supervision. But this is the really cool thing about Janice. She has not only been an elementary teacher, but assistant principal, and now she is a principal and known as a game-changing principal. What she does is incredible work with turning around the trajectories of Title I schools. And for those that you may not be familiar, those are low-income schools that need a lot of extra support given the financial difficulties in their environment. She's known as a turnaround principal. She presents around the nation, and she is known as a game changer in South Carolina. So without further ado, please welcome Janice Malone. All right, y'all. I'm so excited to have you all here tonight. So I want our audience to get a kind of a feel of what your vision is for education. So why don't you just take 1 or 2 minutes to give us an idea of what your vision is when it comes to education?
So we start with maybe Sue. I think it's a great perspective to start with you, Sue. And Janice, just so you know, your microphone looks like it's still muted. So make sure you click that for when it's your turn. But go ahead in there, Sue.
Okay, so I've been homeschooling for a long time, and one of the things that has really come to me recently, particularly with COVID, is how many parents feel ill-equipped and not prepared to school their children or even come alongside them in the journey. And that I have one son who was fascinated with the Titanic, and one of the things that they discovered with the Titanic is that the rudder was too small for that size of a ship. And I think our parents' rudders are too small to steer their children. And you have to grow your rudder. You as a parent have to be able to get the skills you need to help your children, that it's not just a teacher's job. And so how do we as a community help support parents so that they can help their children, so the burdens aren't all falling, it's not compartmentalized to the teachers.
That's good. That's good. Matt, how about you?
Yeah, thank you. So I believe, I kind of start with my belief statements. I believe that parents have been, always will be the dominant influence on the life of a family or life of a child. And therefore, whatever we can do to help bolster their abilities and their leadership benefits the child. I think you said it earlier, Jade, that teachers have been, oh my gosh, just overwhelmed with all of the responsibilities, not just of teaching, but all the other stuff, the social challenges that come with that. That is fundamentally unfair. And as a society, we have not invested in the role of parent to the point where parents feel like they have the ability to step forward and to carry some of the weight. Now, what I've seen is that every parent I've ever met, and I do a lot of trainings with parents, every single parent has a dream for their child, every single one. Most, however, have no idea how to go from where they are to that dream. And so my work is really trying to help bridge that gap, how to try to inspire and try to give them the technical skills to make sure that they're making steady progress day by day for their dream to be achieved.
That's good. That's good. Janice, I want you to come in on the heels of this and let us know what your vision is.
Thank you all. Jade, I'm just so excited about what you've shared, and I share that vision as well. Education is a right, and education should be for all. It doesn't matter where you're from. The doors of education should be unlocked for every single being, and it starts from the cradle. We have to look at that from the birth of that child, because once a child is here, then education starts. And so we need to really look at the entire child, the whole child, from birth to adulthood and then beyond. It never stops. And providing the quality education that every child deserves. We would love for every child to have the support of a supportive family, those where education is a priority in the home. That's not the same, or that's not the story for a lot of our children. So public education serves as that catch-all. It has to be that safety net for all children, and we provide them the quality education that meets their needs where they are, where every child can succeed. So I'm just really an advocate for that, and I'm excited about what you've shared so far.
Thank you. You know, we've been trying really hard to make sure we bring balance. You know, it's easy when we're off in our separate little silos to kind of have one perspective of how things should be, because we've been able to do that thing. And I think one thing that COVID-19 did was it really humbled us in a lot of different ways. You know, things that we assumed everyone had access to, we found out they didn't. Things that we thought we knew, we found out we didn't know much at all. So as I was telling Matt, I think we have a climate now, an opportunity to be heard more, parents, teachers, and students. And I think we have an opportunity to do things differently. So thank you all. I know Isis will be back, and we're going to talk about some questions that I knew were already in the minds of many people listening, but she'll also field questions from the audience as well.
Yes, that's right. Don't forget, we want you to chime in. This is a listening tour. You're not going to just listen to us. We want to hear from you. We want to hear your opinions. We want you to help us cast vision. That is what this movement is about, is hearing from the American people and bringing us all into a conversation that works for all people. So while we wait on you all to chime in, I want to throw out the next question to you all. So what would you say is the number one issue that's facing education, whether it's in general or specific to public or private schools, college, or homeschooling? What would that number one pain point be for you? And I'll throw it to, let's see, who's ready?
I'll go last.
All right. Matt, why don't you take it away for us?
Sure, I'd be happy to try that. So I've already mentioned that the role of the parent to me is really central. But a second from that is that we are in a system that is locked in the 20th century. And that model of education worked for a long time, and it worked really well. But we now are look at us right now. We are having a conversation using technology. We are pushing into a completely different environment. But unfortunately, many of the schools are still stuck in the 20th century when students are absolutely running headlong into the 21st century without sufficient support and guidance. So there's this tension that is being ripped apart now with COVID, where there's a system that's really built for one model, but the new model is coming and it's not going to go away. It's only going to come faster in the future. To me, that's one of those really big areas that we have not spent a lot of time thinking about.
Yeah, I think we were forced to, Janice, the things that we are saying now we need so desperately. It's not like we weren't saying we needed it before this hit. We've been talking about needing that upgrade in technology, for me, bringing arts back into the school. Yes. There were so many things that we've been saying, but they were kind of being said in a vacuum. So Janice, what are you thinking is that number one issue now that we're facing?
Definitely, we have to rise to the occasion for technology. But I think a big issue, another issue is teacher efficacy. We really have to, because everyone came through a teacher. Every profession there is, they all had teachers, and we all can think about those teachers who just made a difference in our lives. Those really positively impacted us. And then we can think about teachers who really didn't, so we, on both sides of that, we can think of, of that. And for the most part, we have to think about how do we support teachers? How do we encourage more people to become teachers? And we're losing that. We're losing that. And teachers in turn have to be able to share the passion for the work. They have to be motivated. They have to be willing to learn. We're all lifelong learners. In order to keep up with the 21st century, our teachers have to be able to connect to the technology that's out there. They have to make education relevant for the students that they teach. I said, as teachers or educators, we're education doctors. We have to be able to prescribe based on the needs of our students. No one curriculum is written for all students. We have to be able to differentiate. We have to be able to think about learning styles of our students. So when I think about the learning styles, the ability levels, the interests of our students, what's relevant to them, it all boils down to what is that teacher coming to us with? And how do we prepare that teacher to meet the needs of those students? And how do we support those teachers? So many people are saying, don't go into education. There's no money into education. And so, then some people are like, okay, I'll go. Well, maybe there's nothing else to do. So how can we build the kind of teaching force that's really going to make a difference for our children?
You're getting a lot of head nods on this one because you have advocates here who believe really in that individualized instruction. Sue, what are you seeing with homeschooling? I remember you were saying a day or so ago that people are going into homeschooling for different reasons than they used to in the past.
Yes. So in the past, homeschooling has been primarily driven, I think, by the religious community, and they were choosing to homeschool so that they could raise their children in faith and education. But that's changing. We're seeing more and more children with special needs coming out of the public school system in particular. We're seeing kids who don't test well coming out of the public school system because their parents, their family feel like the focus on testing as the only marker of success is creating problems for their child, whether it's self-worth or anxiety. But those are two big reasons, two communities that we're seeing right now as a big upswing. So we as home educators that I am part of programs where we provide classes and courses for those students are having to adjust because we as a community are now grappling with many more kids with special needs that are homeschooling for that reason. So the parents are kind of in crisis mode. They had never planned to be home educators, much like the whole nation right now. This is not their plan. And they're being thrust into it because they are struggling to get what they need from the schools.
Sue, there was also a piece of relief when I called you the other day. You said this at the beginning of the call, and my blood pressure instantly went down because just a few days ago, many of us, depending on what state you're in, you just got the news that this is not going away anytime soon. That in fact, even with the reopening, schools weren't going to reopen until phase 2, which was not before May 1st. So we just found out again, we just went into a case of reshock, right? That, oh, you mean we can't just throw this back on our teachers? This is our reality. What was that piece of relief that you kind of offered that I thought you should share?
There's a lot of jokes and memes about homeschooling, but you're not homeschooling, you're crisis schooling. And that's an entirely different beast. And I think some parents right now are comparing themselves to homeschoolers and feeling inadequate. Like, homeschoolers do this all the time. Why am I struggling? Because this was never meant to be what you are doing right now. You are having somebody else's curriculum and plan thrust upon you. You don't know where they've been or where they were going, and you're trying to manage that in a moment. And that is not, it's not homeschooling. That it's, you're trying to do somebody else's plan. This is crisis schooling and chaos schooling. Okay. And you need to give yourself some grace with that.
So we can take that grace, breathe easy, and realize, okay, now that we know this is the reality, we can kind of reshape that for what it really needs to be for our homes, our sanity, and our kids is what I'm hearing. Is that right?
Yes. Well, and I think for some kids, it's a matter of safety. I think there's a lot of frustration right now. Parents are trying to do a lot. Parents are trying to work from home. Our parents are unemployed right now, and there's an extreme level of anxiety. And we have some kids who are in homes maybe that aren't safe or borderline for them, and that parents with the added stress of trying to school on top of that, there's no academic element that's worth your relationship with your child. And if you need to walk away from it all, I just, the safety and health and security of children is what's most important right now. And there's no math worksheet that's more important than that.
That's good. You know, my response is, I guess, kind of a blend of what you've all said in terms of, you know, a number one issue. I think about what we went through with my own child. We were looking for an alternative for him. And the thing is, we weren't leaving places that were awful. We weren't leaving bad schools. We weren't leaving bad teachers. The environment he needed was just not what we could find where we were. And what I remember, and my husband and I, you know, we had the means. We had the means to get the testing, to find out what was really going on. We had the time and the foresight to say, we're curious about what's going on. We also then, when we found out where he wasn't the right place, had the money to be able to send him elsewhere. And one of the reasons that it was so urgent for us to find the right spot for him was because we're in a neighborhood where at school he was one of maybe a handful of African-American students. One of the only African-American boys. What we knew was there was a time limit we had to work within. If we couldn't figure out what was going on with him, we were risking having him be in a position to be labeled, to be misunderstood, and then to have those labels follow him through elementary school and who knew how much longer. And so there was an urgency for us. But one of the things my husband and I both said was, look at what we just went through to get him where he needs to be. How many other kids in that position would have those means? And so it was one of those wake-up calls where you realize everybody can't do what you just did. And so as Janice was saying, if public school is going to be where most kids have to be, it has to be a place that can truly serve them. You know, so to me, it's an issue of, when you look at accessibility, can the most accessible places still provide the highest quality of everything that those kids need? Isis, I'm curious what you have for us next. We won't all be able to answer each question for the sake of time, but and so I'll probably bow out on some of the occasions. We'll see.
That sounds good. I want to ask you all a question from our audience member, one from Houston, Texas. She's asking, do you feel that the current way we are educating children fully prepares them for the 21st century?
And I see Matt's going to want to jump in on that one.
I'll be happy to. And yeah, I hinted at it earlier, I guess, right? So what does the 21st century need? And what is it? What are the demands that are going to be placed on an adult in the 21st century? And then compare that to what schools are typically and kind of producing and training for. So typical school now, it's about facts, right? There are tests, standardized tests that are decided by a bureaucrat across the country to evaluate a child. When In that same classroom, there is a professional that's treated like a technician, by the way. There's a teacher who really knows what that child is dealing with, but she is, or he is, taken out of the loop, right? So the 21st century needs a model that is flexible, that is ready for the volatile and unpredictable environment that we are stepping into. I mean, coronavirus is just one of many dynamics that are pushing this envelope. We have this is the first time in human history where a parent can't predict what jobs will be available in 10 years, right? So think about that, right? If we don't know, why are we teaching kids the way we taught kids 20 years ago, 40 years ago? We should be teaching them how to be thoughtful, entrepreneurial, thinking, creative problem solvers. And our educational structure doesn't give the teachers the freedom to actually do that. They are handcuffed to teach to a test or to teach that which someone else has decided is valuable.
And I do agree with that 100%. We have to not teach our children what to think, but how to think.
That's right.
And we have to give them opportunities to do that. They have to be able to collaborate. They need to be able to work in groups, because hardly do we work in isolation on our positions now. And if they're going to create, maybe invent something in the future, whatever the jobs of the future, professions of the future may be, our students need to be able to problem solve with one another. How do we talk and listen to each other? How do we come to a conclusion together? How do we compromise? How do we investigate? How do we analyze? How do we synthesize? And being able to set up those opportunities. Yes, teachers, today things are confined because, as you said, we're tied to standardized tests. And we have one standard of measurement that predicts or dictates what success looks like. And we know that's not the case. We see children who are brilliant. You give them the art forms. And when they have an opportunity to express themselves through the various arts, you just see the brilliance come through. You see their personalities come through. Yes. You see their self-esteem just grow leaps and bounds, because now you've given them the avenue where they can be successful. You give some of our students Legos even, the opportunity to build, get them in a science lab and let them create, and not tie everything to a paper pencil test, when we know that a lot of our children are not good paper pencil test takers. So we have to think of other ways to determine what success looks like. We have to make sure that we're relevant. We're making it relevant, culturally relevant to today's children. What are their interests, and how can we take their interests and make sure that they have the basic skills of reading, of writing, of speaking, of listening, of thinking analytically? How can we take what their interests, whether it's computers, whether it's Tupac, whoever it is, whatever it is, and how can we take that and bring that into the classroom so that we're connecting with our children? We're losing so many of our students, especially in high school. Middle and high school, we start to lose them. But if we think from the cradle on, providing quality people in front of them that give them opportunities to explore and tap into the various modalities, the multiple intelligences, and see how that child learns. And then in high school, we have to take away the textbook. It becomes so abstract once they hit middle and high school, but they still need the hands-on practical experiences, the real life experiences. We need to think beyond the walls. Instead of thinking outside the box, there shouldn't be a box for our children. We have to remove the box.
Listen, Candace, you are putting, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I have to say, you don't sound like what we are told principals sound like. You are putting all this extra work on the teachers. I'm teasing because, Sue is here because she was one of the teachers in the homeschool hybrid that we found for Jaden. And I honestly have to work not to tear up here, because when we found the school that we sent Jaden to, I had already decided I was going to quit everything I was doing and homeschool. And I knew that meant I was going to have to go to every conference on homeschooling, learn everything about autism and Asperger's. And I was going to do it, right? I was going to do it. But God bless Sue and the other teachers where they were. Me and Sue both, we lit up when you said Legos.
Yes.
Her whole family is an avid
Yeah.
Lego creators. But Jaden, at the time that we sent him to their school, that was his thing. Titanic was before, so it was Titanic, then it was Legos. I will never forget the day when they were learning about maps and direction. And Sue had built him a map out of Legos. And that's how he learned north, west, south, east. My mind was blown. And again, this was a school of a handful of kids, extremely customized. I couldn't help but think, how many other kids would get it in an instant if a teacher realized they were into comics or they were into Legos or they were into Minecraft, and they did that. Whatever the kids were into, they created curriculum around these things. But we say that and people kind of give us an eye roll, Janice, but you're in public school saying we can do stuff like that even at the public school level?
This is what has to happen, especially when you're working. For me, one size does not fit all. One size does not fit all. And I tell the teachers, we have to be creative. And I think for me too, some teachers may become burnout.
Yeah.
But I said, I cannot lower the expectations. No one rises to low expectations. And so for our children to get where they need to be, the teachers need to be, we have to think, we have to create, we have to find their interests, do a survey, look at that child, observe that child. Now let's take and bring it to the classroom. And some teachers are like, really? Why can't I just use this manual?
Yeah.
And go. So I understand the side of it with the teachers, because if we're going to get to the level that we need to get to, again, we have to look at how do we bring these teachers to the level. And one of the frustrating thing is what I require of my teachers, it does take a lot, but they're not compensated or their paychecks when they have to do what I need them to do. And then they have to go work 2 or 3 jobs, two more jobs after school.
Yeah.
So, my heart bleeds for them, because I can't, it's hard for me to say, well, we're not going to do this because you have to go work 2 or 3 jobs,
right.
And I do have one teacher, she literally worked 3 other jobs after work. And I had her to explain to me, how do you make that work and still teach? And so I know I'm not getting your best, because you have to do this until 11 o'clock just to pay your bill. I had one teacher who was had to go before a judge, and she had to take her paycheck. And the judge said, really? Is this what you make a year? She said, yes, Judge, $30,000. That's what I make. And so she had to decide, giving up her apartment or going to some other kind of profession where she could afford to take care, of her needs, her economic needs. So that's the battle that I have, because at schools where parents are not involved, we have to do that for our children. And at the same time, I try to bring parents to a level where they need to get involved. When I think about Head Start, that's another area, with the federal government with Head Start, how we've minimized and have taken a lot of the responsibility from the parents when their children are infants. That's the time where they need to be a part of their children's lives. But the federal government provides Pampers or disposable diapers, formulas, whatever that child needs, and the parent just drops them off. The parent drops them off, and they don't have to do anything else, and they don't even have to come to participate in any of the parenting sessions at all. And we have their children there from 7 until 4 or 5 o'clock. Now, if you have these young moms who are not working, why not be a part of that child's life? Why have we made it so, like I said, not punitive, but it should be purposeful?
Where's the purpose? Yeah, where is the purpose in there?
Right.
I know, Sue, were you trying to get in on this one too?
Well, I think what really struck me as Janice was speaking is we have devalued teachers.
Yeah.
This insistence on teaching to the test has made teachers just a cog. It's like we could just stick anybody in there. So it's not only the salaries. I know lots of dedicated teachers who will work for less. They have lost respect.
Yes.
The respect for teachers is gone. And that this is a person that you are giving your child to for more hours of the day than you see them yourselves. But all the jokes about that teachers are just ridiculous or they don't care, or it's just, and teaching is a craft. There's a little bit of performance and investigation and all of these things. And when you limit them to a certain set of parameters that their salaries or their jobs are linked to, then there's not room, and there's not necessarily any recognitions for those teachers that go above and beyond.
No.
And the respect for teaching as an art, as a craft, we've lost that. And I think the salaries we pay are tied to that, because you know what? If you're working the same as a street sweeper, you're going to be valued the same, and people just don't value teachers. And I think we show that in the amount that we pay them. So let's strip some of the money we give to the testing companies and give it to the teachers.
Exactly. Well, like you said, there's a newfound respect, I think, and after the
everybody respects their teachers more now.
A lot more now.
Teachers, yes.
I do want to give Matt a chance to chime in on this one, Matt.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I just want to point out we are sitting in a problem area right now, because just learned today that the federal government is looking at a $4 trillion deficit. And that kind of deficit hasn't been seen since World War II. We are going to move into a time of austere finances. So there's not going to be monies where they should have been given to teachers decades ago. Those monies are drying up right now. I would argue that I believe there's just one way we're going to get this done, and that is to get parents to start to demand a change in how education happens, and that change fundamentally begins with the teacher becoming very much like the role of a physician. My background is actually healthcare administration, and the physician is the expert, the professional expert that a parent comes to ask for expert advice and to get guidance, right? The minute that physician becomes a technocrat, that parent loses respect for them. So we actually have parents that need to actually push the system to shift, to give teachers the authority to be professionals again. And that is something that parents have the moral obligation to do. They have the right to do it because it's their child, and they can actually push harder than anyone else. So that to me is where we've got an opportunity, but we got to get parents to really appreciate what's at stake and the role and the power that they have to move the system.
That's good.
That's so good. You know, I am just waiting to get in on this conversation right now. As you were speaking, I could feel my emotions rising as a former teacher, and we were in those meetings, and the principal is saying, "I need you to do this. I need you to do this," and I'm like, "With what time and what money?"
Right.
So I think a lot of this, Jade with Operation Restoration, she talks about finding that common ground and casting a new vision. So in these conversations, it's almost as if, well, it's the teacher's job, and now it's the principal's job, and now it's the government's job. And really, I think part of this conversation needs to be, what other positions within the role of one teacher can we create to support that one teacher? Because she's playing many different roles. She's already like 5 different people in one classroom.
Right.
So maybe there's a different other roles that we can have that support just one teacher.
Right.
Like what, Isis?
I'm just saying, when you're a teacher, you're not only just teaching, but then there's all the organizational stuff that comes behind it, and then there's the tutoring that comes behind it. So what would it look like? I'm just thinking off the cuff here. What would it look like to have maybe almost like a 5-person classroom, right? Or people that are focused and targeted different lanes of the functions of a teacher. That way, the person who is good at presenting and getting the kids involved can stay focused on that. That person who's excellent at getting the structure of the lesson plans are good at that. Because I noticed that from my experience, there's a lot of, there's teachers that, they are awesome at getting the kids engaged, but they're totally disorganized, and that part stresses them out. And they leave, but they love the kids, and they're great at communicating, but they leave because they're burnt out and stressed from having to do lesson plans and organizing. But there are other teachers who are killer at organizing. Their classes run like a machine. So what could it maybe look like? Think about education from the different functions, having people who focus in on different lanes. It's like a tag team situation.
Like a teaching team.
Not only, when you think about everything that a teacher has to do, out of that teacher, that teacher is the nurse, that teacher is the mom, that teacher is the social worker, that teacher is the parent advocate, that teacher, is the
truancy officer.
Yeah, truancy officer, everything.
Right.
That those teachers have to make the phone calls. Those teachers have to really encourage that parent. The teacher has to plan the lessons, so many things. I'm fortunate at my school that for the last couple of years, we've had 2 certified teachers in a classroom. We have been piloting that for the district, because when you have a school such as mine, where there are so many needs, not only education, but the emotional and the social needs of our students, the entire thing, the lack of support at home, or the economic disadvantage that a lot of our children may come to us with, all of that comes into the classroom. All of the behaviors, all the situations that the parents are going through, all of it comes into the classroom. So now the teachers have to teach social emotional skills, to those children as well. We have to teach the hygiene. We have to make sure they can clean themselves. We have extra uniforms. We have toiletries for the children. We have a social worker. But, there are so many needs that we have to think, what are the wraparound services so that we can take care of the child, so that the teacher can teach? A lot of teachers say, I just want to teach. And it's almost impossible for them to just teach.
I want to come back towards the end too, with Matt and Sue, to talk even more about that individualized partnership, what an agent would look like, for parents and their kids. And Sue, I'd love for you later to tell kind of the story of the difference in the type of education your 2 sons were receiving, and you talking about kind of having that tag team for every child. But Isis, what else do you have from the audience? I see we have some stuff coming in. I want to make sure we get to them.
Yes, I wanted to call out, I believe it's Dr. Boone, Dr. Rosa Boone, her comment earlier today. She said, in order for teachers to teach the way Janice and Matt suggest, our teaching training programs need major revamping. Parents have a well-documented history of being able to push educational change. And I think that just definitely speaks to the fact that we have to create a new vision if we want this to work for the system. And then also it does, affirm what I think Matt was saying earlier about needing that the parental support.
Yeah. Parental power. I like now, it's like ownership there.
Well, I just wrote about some of this on my blog just the other day. And I think Janice mentioned this, which is really that our parents have been lulled into a sense of lethargy, the sense that it's all going to work out if I just drop the child off and get him there. And in some cases, we've created messages that suggest that's true. It's not. Any teacher will tell you that. But to the doctor who Rosa Boone, Dr. Boone, I think, parent initiated action is what is needed to push a school to do anything. There is no one, it's newsworthy if a parent or group of parents show up at a school to demonstrate on any subject. It's newsworthy. And that kind of power hasn't been harnessed. And frankly, sometimes it's scary, right? It's scary to the institution itself, because now the institution is being called to account. But if you talk privately to teachers and principals, they will say, this is what we need.
Yeah. I always say, especially for me, where my parents don't speak up, I always tell them, I said, we work for you. We work for you. And if the school board or whoever it is only hearing my voice,
right.
That's why PTAs are strong. I said, if you show me a successful school, I'll show you a school with high parental involvement. That's the difference.
That's right. Always.
Between successful and unsuccessful school is the amount of parental involvement. And our parents are, especially for me, where they come from, disadvantaged neighborhoods, they are so disconnected from the school for so many reasons. And I'm telling them, you need to be the voice. You come here, you tell me what you need, ask your questions. I have, every month or every week they can come. My door is always open to try to educate our parents how important that they are the catalyst to the change that can happen for schools, for public schools, if parents will speak up. But a lot of times the ones who get it are those parents who raise the most, most worries about it.
Yeah.
That's so good. I heard a couple of comments coming in. We have one from earlier from Elaine Gomez, and she was talking about community collaborative learning. I believe that's also getting businesses involved, getting other industries involved. What would that look like to have more of a partnership with people outside the schools to fill in some of these areas of expertise? Sue?
Sue's got that.
So I actually want to tackle this one because my boys are both in high school, and as high schoolers, they can go do dual credit at our community college at Lone Star here in Kingwood, and they have not just academic opportunities but also trade skill opportunities. And I think that we are telling kids in this push to get all kids to go to college. There are some kids that are just not academically inclined, and that is okay.
That's okay.
But we're getting them through high school with nothing but kind of a half-baked academic career because they weren't that great of students, and they have no other option.
Yeah.
But what if our high schoolers, by the time they're in 11th and 12th grade, are going into those junior colleges or with industry where there's vocational degrees where they can see, I can get out of high school and have a real job, because right now your high school diploma doesn't get you much anymore.
Yes.
And so you have kids, if your whole life is school and you've never been good at it, then why should you stay?
Yeah.
Right? Like, what's your motivation to get that high school diploma when it's not going to give you anything, when you can instead be going and learning a trade, going in and collaborating with industries or with the junior colleges that already have that infrastructure in place? We don't have to recreate the wheel. And that way the kids feel like adults. They feel like they're moving into the adult world, and they're not going from in May having to raise their hand to go pee to June expecting to be adults out of school and graduated. Now go get a job, live your life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think some of that needs to even start at the middle school level,
Sure.
so that we don't lose them by the time they get to high school. Give them the opportunity to experience the various trade options, because a lot of especially for our boys, and they're just good with their hands, and they just need to be able to excel at something, and then we won't lose them if we give them opportunities, early on. I've partnered with some of the faith-based. I have about 5 churches that have partnered with my school, as well as some of the local businesses. And so we're trying to, even at the elementary level, because if we start early, and I always tell my children, practice makes permanent. And so if we practice the kinds of skills, the kinds of work habits, the work ethic that we want our children to have from a very young age, and so that they're setting goals and trying to meet those goals at the school and outside of the community. We have some of the business partners that are even having to come and work with our children. My husband is setting it up where, some of the men would come and just show our boys and girls how to change a tire. They're building boats, and we're right on the water. So they've built several boats at the school, and they're going to take it out and sail it, just giving them those experiences that they may connect to some careers they may have never thought about before.
That's good. And I think we have to be honest about the underlying question here. This is a conversation also about status and expectation.
Yeah.
I can be very honest and tell you that when I was in high school, there were like 2 lanes. If you were smart, serious student that was going somewhere, you were tracked, right? Your high school diploma, which many students and parents didn't even know they were being tracked. But I was on a college-bound track. And in my mind, if you were going to be excellent, you had to go to a very limited amount of schools. We all can name them kind of in one breath. That's where you went. You didn't even consider going to a community college because there was a stigma with that. If you went to community college, it was because you couldn't hack it in 4-year college. You got multiple degrees. Sue said high school diploma doesn't always amount. Listen, a doctorate these days is not a guarantee of employment. Ask all the doctors running around at community college who said it took them forever to get their job there. But it was really a status conversation. I'm married to someone who went from high school to military. And I remember even for me, that was I had to get over that stigma. Because again, if you didn't go to college, you weren't a serious academic. And so he got out, made much more money than I did. Military, because he was trained in the military to be an air traffic controller. And so immediately he was viable. And there I was with 2 degrees trying to figure out where to go from there. So I think that discussion has to be a new one that's opened up in homes where we destigmatize all of those options as not alternatives. I hate when we call them alternatives. They're all equal options that are
Options.
suited to different individuals.
Mhm.
Matt, did you have a?
Well, yeah, I was going to mention. I mean, one of the real obvious trends in work is it's not what you know anymore, because you can find information, and information is free. It's what can you do with what you know. So even as we look and talk about trade schools, we tend to say, well, if you're not good at if you're not a good thinker and you're good with your hands, then maybe you should go to trade schools. That is going away. Now we need trade folks who are good with their hands, but they're able to build things and to solve problems. So the trade schools have to push their level of performance and urgency up. And not to mention, those roles don't get outsourced. Those roles are always in demand somewhere in the world. And so as we're thinking about higher education, and I've served on two university boards, the pressures on universities to find students, they're doing anything they can to find students, to hold on to the script that they have on our psyche around the importance of a four-year institution. But it's fading. I promise you it's fading. And so
the pendulum is swinging.
and businesses are seeing that. Businesses are now asking fundamentally different questions. It's not where you went to school. Prove to me that you have the skills and understand this industry enough to actually do the work that we're going to expect you to do on day 2. We'll trade you for a day, but then day 2, we expect you to start producing.
That's good.
You know, I want to also chime in here. This discussion makes me think of something that I believe is really important to distinguish. You know, it's not that all kids have to go to college, they have to do one thing, but I believe it's important that they all have the choice and the access and the opportunity if they want to. I think that's something, you know, because on the flip side, I think a lot of times there are teachers, even educators, even who say, oh, well, I think that's all they can do is this.
Yeah.
And they have potential for so much more as well. So I think having an access and opportunity is important. So we have a question from Barbara Henderson of Houston, Texas. She said she would like to hear what you all think about the need for mental and emotional support for educators who are dealing with their own life traumas. How about dealing with COVID-19 and the virtual transition too?
Yeah, we had that question on Monday for healthcare workers who were dealing with their own, you know, emotional and stress issues. Janice, what are you hearing from your teachers right now? What kind of support are they needing right now?
I think that that's going to definitely be needed. I think right now for my teachers, they're I wouldn't say it's depression, but they're just missing their students, missing the normalcy that we've been so accustomed to for all these years, and not having that physical contact with a lot of our children, just stressing out and knowing that even when we do return to school, it's not going to be the same. You know, we're already planning on what school would look like. You know, will we have a rotating schedule? A small amount of children will come and for a few hours, then so how do we change the schedule? What does the calendar look like? And we need to get away from, you know, that 9 months of school, or school starts here. So it's going to be a totally different ball game when we do become post-COVID. So they're just like stressed, not knowing what the unknown, just thinking about the unknown. But even during the school year, of course, you know, teachers have their own personal problems, and definitely we do have for Charleston County, we do have an organization that our teachers can go to, and it's totally anonymous. It's totally private, where they could get the kinds of just therapy to talk about their personal issues, their frustrations, whether it's for family or what the profession brings on itself. But it's going to become more and more of a need moving forward. I can see that.
So we have a, Barbara Henderson is chiming in. I can tell you, she is one of our teachers from Houston, Texas. She's in the middle of this virtual transition herself, and she says teachers are grieving. They are grieving, you know, and I know as an educator, it's heartbreaking to not be able to give your kids your best too. So we have to think about that at this time. Ellen from Houston, Texas says, how is dual credit effective for a student with learning disabilities if the university's academic expectations are not meeting the child's current IEP?
Okay, so my oldest son actually has an autism diagnosis, and we are in the middle of this process right now. And it's not necessarily good news. So the universities are are not prepared for this wave. So I just went to the autism state conference this year, and our admission rates for particular spectrum students have gone up very much. It's great, but our retention numbers are terrible.
Yeah.
And particularly spectrum kids, high functioning spectrum kids who maybe intellectually are on par but have other issues, they are dropping out because they don't have the life skills, they don't have the stress management skills. And so dual credit, it depends on the university that you're looking at. They do provide some services like untimed testing, tutoring supports. What I'm finding is actually are the lower tier schools, community colleges, and kind of like the not top schools are doing more than your top schools, because your top schools are competitive, right? They're not having to support anybody. People are beating down the doors to get there. But it's like the A&M Corpus Christi or Texas Tech that are really having the programs that are supporting these kids who can do work academically, but maybe aren't mature enough or don't have the life skills or the frontal lobe skills to navigate life independently. And that is where I'm seeing the most support is in your lower level schools. So my son is going to be going into dual credit. They do have accommodations at the testing center, but it mostly revolves around testing, depending on your diagnosis.
I don't know the stat offhand, but it was a powerful stat that talked about the incredible increase that we're going to have in our workforce of employees who have different diagnoses, from dyslexia to ADD, ADHD, and autism. And that as a workforce, we were going to have to get used to it and also understand it. We're going to have to do the work to understand it so that we can not be tolerating people coming in the workforce, but that we can be accommodating in a way that's powerful. You know, I am very careful with that word disability. With my son, the way that we have taught him about Asperger's has been, this is how you learn differently. This is how maybe some learners learn. This is how you see things differently. And we're always asking him about what his experience is so that he doesn't have to, in his head, wonder why he's not like everyone else. So we've been able to frame it in terms of, how are you unique? How do you think differently? How do you see the world differently? And that's been, we call it purpose-based parenting over here, which is we have to have him stay connected to who he is as an individual and see what he is dealing with or is challenged by as even a weakness.
Still on the call, guys.
So I'm curious to see, if our workforce, our companies are going to begin to have an attitude of embracing these new types of skilled workers. I mean, some of the things that my son does, I would pay a lot of money to be able to do what he's able to do, mentally and academically and intellectually. And so I wonder if we now need another conversation around how we value people who are atypical learners as well.
That's really good. We have another question that came up here. What are your thoughts around the use of public funding for school choice?
Okay. Janice? We knew this was coming. We knew this.
Yeah. Public funding for school choice. We've for the past 10 years or so in Charleston County is very segregated. You have your Title I schools, predominantly minority children, and then your non-Title I schools. And then what the district tried to do was provide these various schools of choice, right? And then certain children, it almost became, to me, public-private schools for those parents, because then the selection process still isolated a lot of children, did not allow for a lot of children to get in. So I figured most parents came back from the private sector because now they had this school for the 97th percentile. You scored in this, or you have this school for the arts. And then when those schools, because I taught at a creative arts school, at that time we had a 60-40. You had to have a 60% majority, 40% minority. And then that was challenged in court. So those children who could afford to take private lessons, violin lessons, voice lessons, the school became for them. So the disadvantaged children didn't have those opportunities because they didn't have the, you know, the necessary avenues to prepare to audition for those schools. You know, so there were certain schools that still became segregated in a way. But I think school choice is good. I think we need to look at how those children are selected and still try to make an opportunity to have a balanced student population. We have a school that's Butte Elementary. They have the 90s. They're one of the top schools in the state. I mean, in the country. And so now what we're trying to do is look at the disadvantaged school that's right a couple of blocks away. And we're looking at why is it that only a minority, a 2% or 3% minority children are getting in this school. Let's look at the selection process. How is this done? How could we make it more equitable that these students have an opportunity? We got so much pushback from the communities. Parents are saying, oh, you're going to dumb down the curriculum. Oh, you're going to do this. Oh, I don't think my child should go to school with those children. So the conversations, we had a lot of town hall meetings to discuss what would that look like. Well, a lot of the minority parents didn't feel like they would be supported if their children went to those schools. They felt like their children would be mistreated if they went to those schools. And so we had to have a conversations with the parents to figure out why aren't you applying? What's stopping you? What's preventing you from doing that? And so now we had the selection process. We have 49% minority and 51% majority. And so we're hoping that those parents who have been selected will now accept that we can bring more balance, more diversity in schools of choice. So schools of choice are good, but we need to look at what's happening. Are we still making it segregated schools of choice?
Matt, you've worked a lot with choice in charter schools. Tell us.
Yeah, I've worked in public, private, traditional public, private, charter, kind of homeschool. I've been on all of it. And when we talk about school choice, well, there's two parts here. I think Janice was talking about how so many students aren't able to choose the schools that are the quality schools, so to speak, because of policies that kind of segment or segregate. But if you really think about this, every year from kindergarten on, students of low income perform worse. And the reason is not because the school is not performing. It's because of what happens outside of the school. It's in those 185 days where the child doesn't step foot into a classroom. That's the difference maker, right? So now they get to middle school and they now are more competitive. And so they go to the nice school and the little black and brown students aren't eligible. So what we've got is a pipeline problem. And that pipeline starts when the child is in utero, right? That's when the problem begins in terms of the differential between student performance. But my challenge and why I get angry is we let students year by year to continue to progress through the system, knowing that they are behind. Where I live, 70% of the third graders are behind reading in grade level. I'm sorry, in third grade, let me say it again. 70% of the third graders are behind reading level. That means we know that they were behind in first and second, third, fourth, all the way up. And no one ever stops and says, all right, we're going to stop this and we're going to now invest in the essential intent. We're going to make sure that each of these children can read. We're going to throw out the book. We're going to make sure that these kids can read. That is a problem. It's a system problem that, again, parents, if they got upset enough about what really that means for the life and the future of that child, they have the opportunity to side up with teachers and to change that. That is the school choice issue that we don't talk about. The choices that parents need to be making, not just when they pick their school, but the choices they make on a daily basis, the choices they make to advocate and to use the power that they have and to marshal power that they don't realize they have.
That's good.
I'm getting preachy now, aren't I?
I love it.
I love it. Yes, I mean, we are going to have to eventually do a part 2 in the future. But I did want to stick in one final question. If you just give us a quick response to this, each of you, what's the one thing that you think the government can do right now? Or is it not about the government? Just one thing.
For education, what the government can do for education?
Yes, for education, yes.
Well, it's not so much just a government issue, but I think in general, we need to pay teachers more. We've heard that over and over. We have to, the value, it's like when we talk about military people, we say, thank you for your service. Okay, but we still have homeless veterans. We have people coming back who can't make ends meet. It's not enough to just say we respect it, but there are other countries who the teacher is even more elevated than the doctor, and I think we have to create an environment where we value the teacher as being vital and of utmost importance, and we have to put our money where our accolades really are. And I know Sue had a great way that we could pay for it. Sue, can you tell us that way you said we could pay teachers more?
Yeah, so we just take the money away from the testing companies, because the billions of dollars that are going into testing, which what Matt was saying, I think is genuine, is that maybe in our lower grades, let's just focus on reading, because your kindergarten, first, second grade is learn to read. And then you got to go straight and read to learn. If you don't know how to read, you can't read your social studies book, your science book. So maybe, if you look back at kindergarten from the 1950s and the types of things that they were focusing on, and in first grade, it was not as aggressive as it is now. And I think in our desire to take what we want them to know at 18 and bring it down to age 6, we're diluting our efforts. And what our efforts really need to be on is just, let's focus on reading and enjoyment of reading and critical thinking skills and social skills at those younger grades, and maybe not spend billions of dollars in the testing industry to then let that one result dictate all of our policies.
And I agree. Our teachers do need to be respected. I tell my teachers all the time, there's no amount of money that can compensate what you do for children. We should never feel like we can cap it, but at the same time, teachers should not have to struggle for their personal lives in order to give what the students need in the classroom. And I agree with Sue, the focus needs to be on the foundation. If we have a strong foundation, you can build on that. That will take them all the way through high school and through life. If we have a strong foundation that starts with reading, and it starts from birth, really, and teaching our parents. I tell teachers we get so frustrated because we can only deal with those things that are in our control, and our parents are not in our control. But at the same time, if we can just help our parents to see just how important they are, I tell them, leave your children out of your drama. Because our children are affected by the things that go on with the parents. I preach to my parents. I do. I tell them what they need to hear. But if we can ever get our parents on board, we didn't grow up with the best of everything. My mom didn't go knocking down the doors, but my mom said, you're going to listen to your teacher. You're going to do your homework. We had a family support that made sure that, we did our homework. We were clean. We had clean clothes. We went to bed at night. We had that support to make sure an adult was at home with us to make sure that we're starting our day. A lot of our children at 6 years old are dressing themselves. I said, where's your mom? Sleeping. So they're coming to school, the face are not clean. So they're coming with so many things that we need to take care of before we can educate them. But if we get them at that ground level and make sure, as Sue said, that they learn how to read, and do some analytical thinking with math and get that foundation. The lottery here gives, you have to graduate from high school to get lottery money. Well, we need to put that in the foundation where our young children are, and take care of a lot of problems, break the cycle of poverty with a quality education, generational poverty. We can take care of with a solid quality educational foundation.
That is so good. Matt, did you want to
ask what can the government do? Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
We're asking the role of government, and I think that maybe we are asking too much of our schools. And one of the things that COVID has shown us is we're expecting our schools to keep our kids safe and to feed our kids and to keep our kids after school and before school. And maybe the role of the government is to come in and take some of that load off so that the schools aren't expected to be taking care of, getting the kids' clothes washed and taking care of all these things that should. Maybe as educators, as a teacher, I may not be equipped to do all that.
We need
maybe
more
the role of the government.
Workers. Yes, we need more social workers. We need more mental health counselors in the school. We need more parent advocates in the school. We need to be able to bring somehow get those parents who are not working, incentivize them or try to motivate them to be a part of the school, not separate from the school, but an integral part. They're coming and learning too, because a lot of our parents may have not finished school themselves. And if we can do it all, and the school is the hub usually of a lot of these communities. And what can we do to make sure that there are wraparound services that the government can help fund a lot of the positions, whether it's, Title I funds or whatever, so that our students do have some of these other things and take the load off the teachers to do everything. We do have a washer and dryer at my school for parents to come in. I said, wash your clothes, so it's a lot.
It's a lot.
So I want to go ahead and give us a minute. Like I said, we're going to have to do part 2. I am just gassed up with a billion things to say. I wanted to keep going for another hour, honestly. But I want to give each of you an opportunity just to be able to say, share with the audience how they can connect with you. And if you don't necessarily have a business that they can connect with you, what is that one wish? If you could change anything in education, it would be, what would it be? So why don't we start with Sue? Why don't you help us out here?
Okay, so I have no online presence because I'm just a homeschool mom.
Oh, she used the word just. Oh,
Listen,
superhero, homeschooling, beast.
So I would suggest for parents in general, if maybe you don't have the best relationship with your school, but you want some assistance or you want some more insight, contact your local homeschool community, because these are parents who know how to drill down and how to isolate plans for your kids. And even if you have no intent on homeschooling, but if you want to know how you in your home can support your child, or if you notice that your child has some gaps and you're trying to figure out, like, okay, the school may not be able to answer all your needs. So what can you do as a parent to meet some of those needs at home? And your local homeschool community has experts, lots of people with years of experience of really individualizing educational plans. So even if you have zero intent on homeschoolers, we're not going to shut the door on you. We'd be happy to help you figure out what you can do at home to help your kid.
Thank you, Sue. Janice?
Education is everyone's business. Everyone. We have to, as Sue said, our parents need to become more involved in the process. We have to really rejuvenate, energize, inspire everyone to rally around education, because it is an economic issue as well. If we're going to raise the workforce and professionals and the next generation of scientists and whatever, they all came through a teacher. So teachers have to return the respect, regain the respect that educators bring, especially at the foundational level, that will bring the entire system up. We need to put more efforts, more concentration on that. It's a community effort. We need faith-based back into the schools. We need prayer back into our schools. It's been such a foundation. We do it anyway. And it's made a difference for a lot of my teachers as well as my students. On Monday morning, what is this going to look like? Our students need that spiritual foundation as well as the teachers, because we're losing this battle, and we need to get back to the foundation that we once had. It doesn't have to be a separation, but there's a way to do it, and I think we need to, in order to get back to where we need to be in this field of education.
Thank you, Janice. Matt, how about you? How can we connect with you, and what's that one thing you would like to see done in education?
Yeah, I'm going to need 4 or 5 more hours to answer actually that one thing, because there's 1,000. But well, clearly, the role of the parent, that parents, I use language of sport. So I think parents, and the parents I've worked with, they understand when I say you need to think like a head coach, right? A head coach is strategic. A head coach plans ahead. A head coach has an assistant coaching staff. They don't do it all. They make sure things get done. So the mindset shift to me is the thing that will get education reformed. And it's not going to be top down. It's going to be bottom up, led by parents and students. There's a whole conversation we could have about when you're a middle school student, what autonomy you might have going forward. And for folks that want to connect with me, I have a blog. It's called theeducationgame.com. On that blog, you can also connect with me for a free consultation about parent engagement and the role of parents. And essentially, parents will ask me questions, and I'll talk to them and give them my advice. And it's free, so you get what you pay for.
Mm-hmm. And you have an event tomorrow, don't you, Matt?
Oh, right. Thank you for the reminder. Yes, tomorrow at 10 o'clock. If you go to my website under the workshops tab, you can register for. We're having a training for parents around how to help learn at home. And again, parents are struggling with that right now, but very few opportunities are there to really learn from homeschoolers. How do they do it? And I think Sue's point that they're not homeschooling, their crisis schooling is exactly on point, and I'm trying to give them a different way to think about it tomorrow at 10 o'clock. So theeducationgame.com /webinars, and you'll find the registration information there.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you all so much. Jade, did you have any final comments you wanted to make before we leave out?
Yeah, you talk about having an embarrassment of riches, and I feel blessed to know such incredible people. I think the last thing we need right now is a leader who pretends to know everything, or a leader who's afraid to admit what they don't know. And so I'm excited to fill in any of the gaps in my own knowledge, in my own experience with people like what you just saw tonight. So thank you to all of our guests, to Matt, to Sue, and Janice. Isis let the cat out of the bag early, but if you didn't catch it, Janice is actually one of the aunts that I mentioned in the beginning. And some of my earliest childhood memories are going with her to school in the summer to decorate the classroom for the school year. And so I've always had just such a curiosity and an admiration for teachers. And I'm excited to make education one of the leading platform issues that we are going to run with for Operation Restoration. The passion you just saw on the screen, the commitment, the preaching, I want it all in our camp. I want it all in our movement. That's the passion that we must promise our kids, and we must promise it to all of our people, the ones who are looking to leverage the knowledge they have to gain new knowledge, who want to learn more so that they can become more, do more, and ultimately give more. I believe we have the brain power to do this, and I look forward to calling together the most creative minds. Some of what you saw here. We made a point on this listening tour to bring you names you might not have heard of, because we want you to understand that there is value in the wisdom of your neighbors. There is value in the wisdom of the people you already know and your family members. And I'm excited about an era ahead where we'll begin to learn from the people who are actually on the ground doing the things that we are busy putting out policy for. So I look forward to that. I look forward to creating a new era of learning for all. Thank you so much for tuning in and letting your voice heard. We had some incredible questions tonight. I already saw, I think Tony was saying, we got to have a part 2. We're probably going to have a part 2 and 3 to almost every session we do, because there's so much to cover and so much to learn from you as well. Special shout out to all the volunteers for Operation Restoration, for the core team members who put together this production, to all the social media supporters, to the team working behind the scenes, as well as all of our guests who have tuned in this week. And a special shout out to teachers, educators, parents, homeschoolers, students everywhere. I really think of educators now as really the other frontline worker that we're not talking about as much, but I'm excited about an era we get to elevate their status and also back up our talk by walking the walk and really beginning to honor and compensate our educators much better than we are right now into the future. So thank you, Isis, for giving me that time.
Absolutely. It has been an honor to hang out with all of you tonight. I know you see these comments just going off left and right. So you have to keep your comments in there, because I'm sure that will inform our next stop. And we just thank you so much for taking part of your Friday night to tune in on such an important conversation on a new era of education. Look, if this message is hitting home with you, we invite you to like the Operation Restoration 2020 page. We're on Facebook and also Instagram, as well as check out the website. Learn more about Jade's platforms and her policies, where she stands on a lot of different issues. That is www.operationrestoration2020.com. And lastly, we want to invite you to connect with us. So you can text the phrase One Nation all one word, to 33777. That's One Nation, all one word, to 33777. We look forward to connecting with you. And look, we have on May 4th, Monday, May 4th, coming up, our next listening tour. To give you a sneak peek, drum roll please, that is going to be on race relations, and you know that is going to be good. So again, text One Nation to 33777, and we look forward to staying connected with you online. Have a great evening and enjoy your weekend. And let's get our kids learning again.